What's up, everybody? This is Nemes, and welcome to the channel update and 2,500 sub Q&A. I have a list of questions. I'm going to touch on a couple things from just a channel update perspective because we got some wackiness coming up from a schedule perspective. The schedule you see in front of you is actually mostly June. The last weekend change is July. I'll try to do these a little more often, and I'll throw the schedules in there. So as you can see, what I do here basically is I just show what I've recorded, what I plan to record. If is usually in red. I haven't updated the rest of this week yet, and I actually have a couple things of note here. So one, there's going to be a 4-day delay or absence of the EU4 multiplayer. There are some scheduling conflicts with a couple of the guys who are not able to record this week's session. So after Wednesday this week, there'll be a 4-day absence, and then next Monday, July 10th, that will come back, and all will be normal again. Also, that's the main thing. I've got two other series happening right now. The City Skylines video, which we've had great response on. Thank you guys very much. And the Hoi 4 US in celebration of Freedom Birthday. I'm going to do something else after that. I used to do kind of the every other day up thing, but I figured this US one was probably going to be pretty quick, so I just kind of did a straight shot of all, there's probably going to be more than 7 episodes, but I'm kind of doing it all every day, a daily release just for that. A couple things there. One, how do you guys feel about the every other day? Because what I used to do, if you look up here, is I had like, Hungary, and then Germany, and then Hungary, and then Germany, and then Hungary and Germany. So it's kind of like an every other day thing. I had the EU4 multiplayers going strong, and then I've been doing daily releases on the City Skylines. I'm trying to record the City Skylines just kind of one day at a time so I can get the feedback from you guys as quick as possible. Let me know what you think of that as well. And then I've got some travel coming up that will impact that to some degree. So I think next week I'm out for a few days, and maybe even the week after. So I'll have to record a little ahead for some stuff for that. But we'll see how everybody likes the City Skylines. I don't know if that's a long-term thing or a short-term. It's kind of all up to you guys and how much you watch it. Patreon. I'm going to mention Patreon once again. Patreon is a huge help. As you guys, I think I said this in the last video, but like $1 on Patreon, which isn't hopefully a lot, right? For the price of what is that, like 1/7 of a Starbucks coffee nowadays? That's the equivalent of watching over 1,000 of my videos in a given month. So $1 a month does that much help to the channel. That's a ballpark number, right? There's some different YouTubers throw around, but it is really important, and it is really helpful. And it helps kind of maintain the channel itself. You guys obviously do not have to do that, but for those of you who do support us, like Schmitty and Caleb and Alec, thank you guys so much. It really does make this a lot easier to do, a lot easier to fit into my family situation. As you guys know, I do have a young daughter, and so taking time away from her, in addition to the fun, obviously, we're looking for growth in the channel and hopefully some ways to fund some of these things that I'm doing, because between the games and the sound effects and all the other software, it's not the cheapest hobby in the world. But anyway, so if you guys can, awesome. If you can't, no big deal. At least join us on the Discord. The link for that will be down below. It's just so you can interact with us on a regular basis. Myself, I'm there, and then Pickle, who is one of our BerCrew channel, part of the BerCrew channel family, is also on there. Somebody asked me what BerCrew was earlier, and I don't know, I think it was Discord actually. And BerCrew is actually a shout back to some of us who gamed together, kind of where we grew up. We were the BerCrew. Burrs were the Burr is the first part of the city that we grew up in. Anywho, I will get to the questions now, which is the main reason for this video. We didn't have a ton of questions. We only had a few people throw them in there. I'm going to do another one of these at 5,000. So if you guys have more questions, don't hesitate to save them up, and we'll get them answered. First question from Caleb: why did you choose to start YouTube? I've been watching YouTube for quite a while, and I always kind of had this feeling like, man, Not right away, but I felt like, man, eventually, and I would say not yet, I'll be able to be as good as some of the guys that I watched on YouTube, and could have as much fun and be as much fun. And, so I kind of, there was a little bit of ego, but also it was something that I wanted to kind of start doing with my friends. So as we've all gotten older, had kids, it was a way to kind of allow us to have interactions together on a more regular basis. Now, that didn't work out exactly as we intended. It did short term, but everybody's lives continue to kind of evolve and whatnot. But it's been kind of neat because the unintended consequences. So that's why I started YouTube, was for friends and because I wanted to try it. But I tell you, it's been really cool starting to become part of these communities, both with the YouTubers, who are people who I consider friends or moving in that direction, really, really good acquaintances, but also, just the communities around them, right? So Bob and I met on kind of actually YouTube messaging back and forth as I think Bob approached me about doing a series together a long time ago. And Bob's been great the whole time. He's been a huge help. We kind of threw some ideas back and forth with each other in the early days, so it was kind of neat, kind of growing up with these guys. Now, Bob and Midge and some of those guys have grown faster than I have, but there's some different reasons for that, and I'll get into that maybe in a future video, kind of my journey through YouTube. But yeah, that's why I started. My favorite non-Paradox game. Boy, that's a hard one. Hmm. My favorite non-Paradox game. Now you're gonna. Now, I thought I had prepped for all these. I did not prep for that one. I mean, the original Master of Orion 2, if we're gonna go retro, was probably one of my favorite games of all time. I really love. It really grew my love for the genre of 4X and maybe just larger strategy games in general. So I'd say if I'm gonna pick one, and it's an oldie, it'd be Master of Orion 2. There's a lot of great games out there historically. I really enjoyed Civ 4 and 5. But if I had to pick one, it would be Master of Orion 2. So Pickle has some different things. Do you miss our old neighborhood nachos? No, because I still eat them periodically. So Pickle and I grew up in a not very wealthy part of town. We were kind of the poor kids in where we the metropolitan area we are. Not the worst off, but certainly kind of lower middle class or low right at the edge there. We used to eat quote unquote nachos, and what nachos were in that part where we grew up were potato chips and American cheese, and you stick them in the microwave, and that was what we called nachos because we were young and we didn't know any better and we didn't have any money for real nachos, so it was what it was. My least favorite type of food, Thai food. Not a fan of the huge spice. Don't like curry. Don't like anything of that variety. Not a knock on Indians. Just don't. The spices don't agree with me. I've eaten some good Indian food with some friends who are from the area, from India, and it's decent, but it's still just not my favorite food. I wear a size 13 shoe. It's a weird question to ask me, especially for someone who knows me. Did you know that the video ended with "I've been Nemes" and nothing else? Nemes. And by the way, you can't pronounce it Nemes or Nemes. It's the name is actually, oh god, almost 20 years old. That I've had that handle, and it was originally short for Nemesis, so Nemes is okay, but most people call me Nems now. And no, I didn't know that, but thanks for telling me. Oh, I don't hold you anymore because I've moved on, Pickle, to things that are more curvy, less bumpy. What piece of technology you've purchased and looking back regret ever buying? Oh, that's a rough one. Um, hmm. Piece of technology I've purchased and looking back, I haven't had a lot of that. Even the stuff that never panned out, for the most part, I've got something out of. Um, Probably, if we're gonna like tie this back to like games, I would say maybe the PlayStation 3. Um, the thing was loud as a jet airliner because I had the first generation one and I never really played a ton of games on it. Um, Beyond that, I don't know. I'd have to think about it. I did buy a tablet PC, kind of one of those early Windows 8 touchscreen. It wasn't really light enough to be a tablet. It wasn't really a full laptop, and I regret buying that. That was a dumb choice. Last time I rode a bicycle, probably November last year. Um, why do I choose to worship the flying spaghetti monster, and what greatness is the entity bestowed upon you? Well, great intellect, and why wouldn't I choose to? He's delicious. If there's a bit of advice you could give your 15-year-old self, well, what would it be, and why that piece? Don't worry about things so much. You're a teenager. Why that piece? Because man, at 15, everything seemed serious, and every problem was the end of the world. And man, you just don't realize how good you had it at the time. Maybe that's the better piece of advice I'd give is enjoy this time of your life. Because I don't think I did personally. I think I was kind of in a rush to get through that part of my life, and there were different reasons for that. But man, I wish I could have, if I could go back and smell the roses in that age, I would do so. Who would win a fight between a paintbrush and a paint roller? I'm going to say the roller just due to girth. Um, Zat had a few. What is my all-time favorite game? I did answer that already. It would probably be Master of Orion 2. Um, I mean, I guess that's a strategy game. If I had to say all-time favorite game, it's probably like one of the Zeldas, like Zelda, the one on Super Nintendo, or maybe even the regular Nintendo one. Um, or you know what I really liked? Rygar. It was an old Nintendo game. It kind of was a side scroller and a heads over. A lot of depth to it. You couldn't save. Rygar might be my all-time favorite, like just generic game, outside strategy. How do you compare older games to new games? Well, older games, and I had this conversation recently. Older games were a little more cerebral. I felt like they were way more gameplay dependent. I don't know if you guys have ever played like these like game tycoon style games where you've got all these people and you got them working on some stuff. I think I was talking about Zork the other day. Zork was one of the first RPGs I ever played. Zork was a text only game. Um, and the thing about those old games, whether not necessarily text only games, but where the graphics weren't as big a deal, is it was all about the gameplay. Because while it was cool to have those pixels on the screen, no one was sitting there looking at that game because of the pixels. There were no graphics back in the Pitfall days or the Pac-Man days or winter and summer games that I played on the Commodore, or even the early Nintendo games like Super Mario Brothers and Zelda. The graphics weren't a draw. They're a draw now. And so there's so much more development time now put into games graphically than there is for gameplay and challenge, that I really feel like the older games did have more depth, but that's where they spent most of their cycles on. It was the story, it was the how do I get through levels, and they just weren't as distracted because of the graphics aspect. So that's not all to say games have gotten worse over time. They've just changed, right? I think there's more focus on maybe making it almost like a movie, graphically very high end. I'm playing some NBA 2K17 on my console this week, and they've made like career mode almost like an interactive movie. So I think there's just been a shift. I personally, because I grew up on those older games with more depth, I believe that they had that. But I think it's just because that's what they had to focus on. There just wasn't enough else to focus on. There wasn't enough sound. There wasn't enough art. There wasn't enough anything. The platforms just didn't support it. And sorry, I skipped one question. Actually, I guess I kind of combined two of those questions. Has early access partly ruined the quality of game? I have mixed feelings on that. My answer is yes and no. My answer is no, and it hasn't ruined the quality of games because I think what it has allowed is it has allowed more developers to do more risky things or to maybe even perfect a concept. And I'll throw some examples of that out there, like survival games. And if you were an early fan of the channel, you back when we were all on the same channel here, we did a lot of things like Ark and things of that nature. And those sandbox games Man, they really started to. I don't want to say perfect because I don't feel like the genre is perfected yet, but there was so many of those games that you started to get consistencies between them, which improved that whole genre. There's still a long way to go, but that's a very ambitious example of a type of game. But there's also like a lot of retro platformers and creative games that have come across with early access, thanks to early access, where these smaller indie developers could, they could take a chance. They could do that. Now, where early access has partly ruined the quality of games is you run into very unfinished games. There are a lot of quote unquote early access games that never make it to release 1.0. And that ruins the quality of games in a big sense because it harms the what's the word I'm looking for? Um, the trust of the consumer. And so I think if there was a way to kind of have a little bit of the best, I think there's probably more refinement they could do on the early access system to make it less what it is today, which is a total crapshoot. So I think it is good overall, but still needs work to get to the point where it's where it should be. All right. I've been Nems. I hope you guys enjoyed this Q&A and the channel update. If you have any questions, do leave them down in the comments below. If it's a question like these big picture questions, I'll do that in another video. But if it's just a refinement of anything I've asked or said in response, or any questions on the updates around Patreon, the schedule changes, anything of that nature, like what's on the channel now, you can go ahead and leave those below. And I want to thank you guys for watching this their channel update, because I know channel updates are not the most exciting videos, especially to watch all the way through the end here. But I thank you for doing that, and we'll see you guys next time.